2, and 1. Yes, we had the first 4 of the big dance last night, but the 2021 NCAA tournament in earnest starts today. The round of 64 gets underway on this beautiful Friday. We have 16 games on Friday, including 5 Big Ten teams, 16 more games on Saturday, including possibly 4 Big Ten teams. Our round of 64 Big Ten full weekend preview starts right now on the Locked On Big Ten podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Big Ten podcast, a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Ben Stevens. It is Friday, March 19th. And on this great Friday, we have the NCAA tournament ahead of us. The round of 64 is filled. We know the bracket, and we are looking forward to the best days in all of the Big Dance. And joining me for this full weekend preview to preview every Big Ten team that will be playing in the round of 64 is our dearest acquaintance in the entire world. It is Michael Severe, the host of Severe and Benning in the morning on 1620 The Zone in Omaha, Nebraska, as I declare him the Omaha sports talk radio hosting legend, the best in my mind to ever do it over the airwaves in Omaha, Nebraska. Michael Severe, pleasure to have you back on the podcast once again.
You know, based on what we were talking about before, I'm glad you said it was a great Friday and not a good Friday.
Ah, there we go. We might dive into some religion with a bonus pick at the end of all the categories we have to discuss. But we have 9 Big Ten teams that have qualified for the Big Dance. We are recording in full transparency before Thursday night's play-in games, which Michigan State is a part of in the final first 4 game against UCLA inside Mackey Arena on Thursday night. I would say, if you listened to this podcast yesterday, the 2 for 4 for Thursday with our good friends from Locked On Spartans, Matt Sheehan and Will Hunter, we all expect, although it might be a little dicey at time, for Michigan State to prevail over UCLA and get into the round of 64, where they would match up against the number 6 seed in the East region, BYU, on Saturday. So that will be our bonus pick later on. But what we know for sure is we have 8 teams playing in the round of 64, 5 on Friday, 3, possibly 4 on Saturday. And Michael and I will go through each of our picks, giving you our 4 categories: our best Big Ten matchup of the weekend, our locked on lock of the weekend, our underdog special for the round of 64, and then a 4th category of our creative choosing. And this time, Michael Severe, all of our spreads, lines, totals provided to us by our good friends at betonline.ag, because they've had these opening round lines out since the bracket was released late Sunday night. So we know everything ahead of us. No Ken Palm spreads needed. We have all of our spreads in tow, except for one: Michigan against the number 16 seed in the East region. Another one of those play-in games on Thursday, but we'll discuss if they play Mount St. Mary's or Texas Southern. So that is what we have ahead of us. We have 4 categories, 8 great Big Ten teams, possibly 9 great Big Ten teams and matchups to preview. Are you ready for the round of 64 Locked On Big Ten full weekend preview?
I'm already exhausted. That was a lot, man. Let's go. Yeah, let's go. Let's do it.
Just verbal garbage just coming out. Just had to get everything set the stage.
Locked on, best game pick of the underdog session. Let's go.
Do you follow it, though? Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm all about Mount St. Mary's. Let's do it.
You want to talk about that? We will talk about that.
I'm a fan of that. I'm picking them, actually. I took them as an early bet. Yeah, I like them.
To beat Texas Southern?
Yes.
All right, we'll trust you there. 2 teams that play completely different styles of tempo, by the way. Texas Southern, one of the fastest teams in the country. Mount St. Mary's, the slowest team.
One turns the ball over a lot. I'm big on turnovers. I'm big on free throws. I'm big on offensive rebounding. You'll hear that a lot coming up.
That's great insight, and that's why we trust Michael Severe. He also a betting man who knows his stuff, folks, and that's why we let him begin with our first category for this round of 64 full weekend preview. It is the best Big Ten matchup of the weekend. Michael Severe, what game are you highlighting in this category?
Well, actually, I like the UConn-Maryland game, and I don't know if it's the best matchup, but I love the matchup in general. As many of these games have, there's injury concerns. We've had COVID in games. We've had guys who are banged up. We've had concussions. And UConn is like that. RJ Cole's a little banged up, a little worried. I'm hoping he plays based on the fact that I like UConn in a matchup. But one of the greatest plus-minus matchups in all of this thing. Maryland, offensive rebounds, last in all of college basketball. UConn, offensive rebounds, number 1 in all of college basketball. I like UConn to run away with it. I know Maryland's gotten some big wins this season. I like them. I've always liked College Park. It's one of my favorite campuses in all the Big Ten. I just like offensive rebounds. I like offensive rebounds and teams that make their free throws, and I think UConn will be that team. And James Bouknight is just so much fun. And, you had the Kimba run years ago. This is kind of like the same feel. So I would take that as my favorite matchup.
UConn struggled early on in this college basketball season, but with the team they have right now, including James Bouknight, who might be one of the best individual players in the NCAA tournament. They're probably more of a number 4 or number 5 seed, really shouldn't be on that 7 line. And RJ Cole's health is definitely a status we need to learn. He is dealing with some concussion protocols. But if RJ Cole and James Bouknight are playing, probably one of the most dynamic backcourts in the entire Big Dance, and then Isaiah Whaley, who crashes the board very, very well, I think this is a tough matchup for Maryland, who I'm not sure is able to keep up with the pace that UConn might play at. Maryland's going to try to grind them down. I think the matchup between Daryl Morcell, the Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, against James Bouknight is going to be theater that we would love to see on Saturday. But as it stands, Maryland, a 3-point underdog. I agree with Michael Severe. I think UConn wins this game and wins big. And I look forward to most likely UConn taking on Alabama in the round of 32 on Monday, because Maryland and UConn play on Saturday. That will be a great game. Michael Severe, would you pick UConn to possibly upset Alabama? Looks like we're having some technical difficulties, as Michael Severe might have been muted as he has lost.
Dog do that?
There we go.
My dogs are really bad. Did a dog come through here and hit that button? Because it wasn't me. That's very strange. Real quick, I want to say this. 335th in the country is what Maryland is in offensive rebounds. 335, and UConn is getting 13 a game. So yeah, I would. Yes, I would like them in advance. I think UConn is one of those teams that has a player dynamic, as you mentioned with Bouknight, that could go as far as the Elite Eight. There are a couple teams like that. If that guy gets hot, it could happen. For sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. So my best Big Ten matchup of the weekend features the South region. The number 13 seed in the South, North Texas, taking on the number 4 seed, Purdue. Purdue is a 7.5-point favorite. The over-under total is 127. I have said for the last couple of weeks, I am very, very high on these Purdue Boilermakers. Sneak peek, I have Purdue advancing to my Final Four. Whoa, that's a hot take, but I like Purdue and the game they are playing right now. They have won 5 straight games. It seems Michael Severe agrees with me. You think the Boilermakers have the potential to make a Final Four run?
I have Purdue, and I do 3 or 4 different brackets, and they're all very similar. They all end basically the same, but there are a couple spots in the Elite Eight where I go one direction or the other, and one of them is that. It's either Purdue going on. I have another one where it's Texas going on or Florida State. So, yeah, I have that a couple spots. I think Purdue could be in the Final Four easily. Only concern I have is that they're young. Right? I mean, young teams don't always necessarily win when you get to the Elite Eight, and they're going to have to overcome some of that. But they do a lot of things that I really like. I love Purdue. I mean, they got great coaching, one of the best coaches in all of college basketball. So that's a team that if they made it to the Final Four, I wouldn't be shocked.
I have Purdue facing off against Ohio State for what would be the 4th time this year in the South Regional Final, and I have Purdue advancing to the Final Four. As we focus on this game against UNT, North Texas, Purdue has won 5 straight games to end out the regular season, pushed Ohio State in an overtime thriller last Friday in the quarterfinals of the Big Ten tournament, and Trevion Williams took over in that second half. He finished with 26 points, 14 rebounds, and one of those freshmen who has come on so strong, part of the all-freshman Big Ten team, Jaden Ivey, had 19 points. You throw in Zach Edey off the bench, he had 11. And I think some of the cornerstone pieces of this Purdue team outside of Trevion Williams, who is a junior and has that experience, you look at Sasha Stefanovic, you look at Eric Hunter Jr., they have a little bit more experience than some of the freshmen that fill out the rest of that supporting staff. So I do like what Purdue has heading into the NCAA tournament. Now, as I look at this matchup against North Texas, both teams played a pretty slow pace. Purdue, 274th in the country. North Texas, 350. There is only 357 teams playing Division I college basketball this year. So for North Texas to be 350th shows you they play a pretty slow pace, but they are a pretty good shooting team. 39th in the country in effective field goal percentage, around 54%. 33rd in the country in three-point shooting percentage at around 37% rather. But Purdue, pretty good at guarding the three-point line. And one thing North Texas did not do very well is they don't get to the free throw line a lot, and they do turn the ball over a decent amount. I know that's one of the things you highlight as well. 244th in the country in turnover percentage. So I think if the Boilermakers can guard the three-point line well against the Fighting Mean Green of North Texas, and they make them play a different style of game than they would like, where they're not going to get to the free throw line a lot, maybe frustrate them defensively to force some of those turnovers, I think Purdue can win comfortably. Although I know North Texas is a pick a lot of people have as on their upset radar. Do you think there's any credence to that idea?
Well, it's because of the game, as you mentioned, the pace. I have this game made at about 130 for a total. They have 126 in Vegas. So anytime you have a game that's slow of a pace, it's going to probably come down to the last 8 minutes, last 4 minutes. And so anytime you get a game with that kind of possession, I can see it. I just think Purdue is going to be able to pull away in that second half, especially if there's foul trouble for North Texas. By the way, I'm old enough to remember when they were University of North Texas, North Texas State, and they were just the Eagles, and they weren't even the Mean Green. So all of those things have happened over the last 25 years where they've changed all their names. My brother-in-law went to school there. I joke with him. I said, man, your degree's not even good anymore. They changed their name of the school. But he still claims that he went to school there. But yeah, I think at a slow pace like that, I think that 126 is a little too low. I think over kind of a extra pick for you there, but it's going to be a lower scoring game. That's why it could certainly be a trouble for either team late in the game.
Yeah, I think over-unders generally have to do with the pace more than anything in college basketball, but both these teams are pretty efficient on the offensive side of the floor. Purdue, 23rd in the country in offensive efficiency and 23rd in the country identically in defensive efficiency. I like Purdue even to cover that 7.5-point spread. So we move on now to our Locked On Locks for this round of 64 weekend as it pertains to the Big Ten teams in the Big Dance. Give me your Locked On Lock. You bet you are most comfortable in with this weekend.
I will admit I'm not overly comfortable with any lock involving a Big Ten team, but I like a couple different ones. One that you kind of stole from me. I love Rutgers. I love Rutgers going against Clemson. That's one of my favorite bets. Again, like I said, I have 4 brackets. They're all really the same, but Rutgers is going through against Clemson in all of them. I actually like Rutgers as a sleeper to get definitely to get to the Sweet 16, but even a sleeper to get to the Elite 8, what they can do. That surprised me. It wasn't one of those things, but just going over the numbers I like. Again, I'm big on turnovers. I'm big on getting the free throw line, making your free throws, big on offensive rebounds, all those things I like about Rutgers. And so I love that game against Clemson. I think I would love the game if it was Rutgers by 8. I mean, still, I really like them to put it on Clemson a little bit. And I'm also a little down on parts of the ACC. I think the ACC was a little overrated. I believe in the Big 12 and I believe in the Big 10, but basically everybody else I think was overrated for the most part.
I agree with you. Do you have another Locked On Lock outside of the Rutgers Clemson game that you enjoy?
So my other one would be Grand Canyon, and I know it's weird because people look at a team like Grand Canyon and they say, what, Grand Canyon against Iowa? Are you nuts? Line is 15. Grand Canyon has 2 big guys. And as you know, because of injuries, that inside, Ucla Garza is probably going to play even more minutes. If this is a close game with his backup being injured, he's going to be in there a little bit longer. They have 2 7-footers from 2 different foreign countries. They're going to give Ucla some problems. I just like him keeping it within 15. I wouldn't be surprised if you're late in this game, 4-minute break, and you're like, this is only a 9-point game. This is Grand Canyon. What the heck? But I like them to cover the 15.
Can you pronounce the 2 names of the 2 big men for Grand Canyon University?
What big man 1, big man 2?
Yeah, both seniors. There's Asborn Midgard, the 7-footer, 270 out of I don't know where. I could look into that. And Alessandro Lever, 6'10", 235, also a senior. There has been times this year where Ucla Garza has struggled against a dominant post presence from another team. You think of the game against Michigan when Hunter Dickinson matched up very well with him. You think of the battles that he's had against Kofi Coburn. That's also saying, and I always throw this caveat. Yeah, true. Very well. Very good point. But I also throw this caveat on Ucla. He can struggle and still probably put up like 18 and 8, and we just kind of take it for granted. So I don't think you're not saying Grand Canyon gets the win, but they can cover that margin.
I think they cover the 15. And by the way, Midgard, that's from Thor. You know that, right? That's what they call this world. They call it Midgard in the Asgard world of Thor. Midgard is Earth. So maybe he's from Earth. Wow. Certainly a possibility. But no, I looked at both their names and I went, I like them. They're both big, 173, 171. They're going to give them some problems. I just like it to stay close. And that's what happens a lot in the 116s, the 215s. You'll be like, why is this game still a game? It happens more than not. So I think that's going to be the case this time.
And GCU is a pretty good team. Bryce Drew in his first year as the head coach has done a great job with them. They are not bad. I mean, this could be a 215 game that, like Michael said, could be close, although Iowa probably moving on.
Quick note about that. Fran recruited Bryce Drew to college. Now, he ended up going where Fran was, but he actually recruited him, and it was close. I believe he was an assistant at UCLA at the time, if I remember correctly. And so they have that connection from way back then.
Oh, wow. That's another great nugget from Michael Severe. That's what he provides here in this round of 64 weekend preview on the Locked On Big Ten podcast. You alluded to it. My Locked On Lock is that Rutgers game. I have a question for you before I dive in to some of the metrics why. When you see a 7-10 matchup, which seed do you consider the lower seed? This has been a topic of debate all week long.
The lower seed? Well, the lower seed would be the 10 seed.
Thank you. Boom. Good.
Yeah.
All right. We're on the same page.
There's a debate.
Yeah. Some people consider that being the higher seed because it's a bigger number.
No, I don't like that at all. I don't like those people.
I agree with you. I would call Rutgers the 10 seed in this matchup, the lower seed. And along those lines, Rutgers is the only lower seed in all 32 games in the round of 64 to be favored in this spot. They are the only lower seed that is a favorite heading in to the opening weekend of the NCAA tournament. Rutgers and Clemson, both two top 20 defenses, and that's why you see the total as it is at 126. Rutgers, by the way, as the favorite, a 1.5-point favorite. I'm not going to sit here and say I've loved what I've seen out of the Rutgers the last 2 to 3 weeks, but there was a lot of pressure on them to end out the regular season, to get to the big dance and to get some clinching wins for the first time in 30 years. But they do have the makeup of a team, like Michael mentioned, that can make a run in March. They are very experienced. They have Geo Baker. They have Ron Harper Jr., Miles Johnson down low. Jacob Young is incredible on what he does both ends of the floor, probably one of the best defenders in all of the Big Ten Conference. He always gets his hands on a lot of passes in there, breaking up a lot of plays. The only thing that scares me about Rutgers, they're the worst free throw shooting team in the NCAA tournament. Yeah. That's not great. Don't love that going in. Right. But I do believe that Rutgers is playing a better brand of basketball even than Clemson because, like you, I think they're overvalued. I don't think they should be on the 7 seed line. I know you take into account the full body of work, and Clemson started out the year 9-1, but over the final 2 months kind of were on a slide. They lost 4 of 5 after starting 9-1. Then they started to round into form. Then they got hit with a brief COVID pause. And since coming back from the COVID pause, they're just 3-2 against like the bottom foes in the ACC. And they've only scored 70 or more points in one game out of those 5 since they've returned from that COVID pause. So Clemson really going the other way. I like Rutgers in this spot. And like you, I think Rutgers will upset Houston in the round of 32 and advance to the Sweet 16 because the defensive energy, if it's on point for Steve Peichel and company, can confuse Houston a little bit, I think, in that round of 32 game to let Rutgers go to the Sweet 16. So I like Rutgers in this spot to cover the 1.5-point spread. Over under total, I'm not really going to mess with it. But again, 2 top 20 defenses. That's why you see the total as low as it is at 126.
And as you mentioned, the one concern is you very rarely see the difference in free throw shooting as big as this. Clemson is a team that averages something like 76% shooting it. You have another one that averages like 62%. This is similar to actually a team that you know a little bit about is Creighton and UCSB. In that game on Saturday, you have a huge free throw disparity as well. But you rarely ever see one this big. But the hope is, I think we both have the same hope, that Rutgers is going to be up enough to where that's not going to matter.
Right. I think if Rutgers plays its best basketball, which starts from the defensive end, that allows their offense to play better. And a good sign for Rutgers offensively, Ron Harper Jr., who struggled a little bit towards the end of the regular season, has scored in double figures 5 straight games. And in the blowout loss to Illinois in the quarterfinals this past Friday, he still posted 21 points. So he's finding his offensive game a little bit more. He's a huge component for what they want to do, obviously. One of the best pure scorers, I think, in all of the Big Ten Conference. So we have our locked on locks. We have our best Big Ten matchups of the round of 64. Now time for everybody's favorite when we look at the bracket, the upsets, the underdog specials for this opening weekend of the NCAA tournament. Michael Severe, you gave me Grand Canyon University to cover that margin. Is there another one that you see in terms of facing off against a Big Ten opponent?
That's really the only one I would say. My other ones would be totals. I like a lot of the totals, basically, again, off of pace and then free throw shooting, as I mentioned, and then three-point shooting. The other game I really like is Wisconsin and UNC. It's not a big number. You know, it's 137, but I like it under that. I think it's going to be a slow game. We know what Wisconsin does. We know how they play. I like UNC in terms of the way they play, but they turn the ball over so much. You had a team at one point that was averaging 20 turnovers a game. You lose possessions with that many times. If they're not live ball turnovers, the other team's not going back and scoring. So I see this being a real battle. Upper 50s towards the end of the game, getting into the 60s could be kind of a sloth. I like that one to be under 137 for UNC and Wisconsin. I think UNC ends up winning the game because I think they just end up at the end. I think they just have a better overall athleticism, but I think it's a low scoring game.
So we will call that our underdog special of this weekend, as Michael Severe sees it. I also think it's a tough matchup for Wisconsin against UNC. I've said that a couple times throughout this week. What UNC does so well is they're long, they're athletic, they play at a fast pace, they crash the glass so well. I think you'll see a Nate Reavers, Micah Potter combined rotation on the floor. I think Greg Gard has to do it because of the front court depth for North Carolina. That's not a great offensive system, in my opinion. I struggle to find where Wisconsin will score to keep up in this game, but they are the underdog. So maybe if you want the point in the hook, but I don't really know. It's not a great line for Wisconsin. It's not a great matchup for Wisconsin. I do like the under, though. I think UNC's offense and the pace they play at might be a little overvalued because they're not a good shooting team. They are not a good shooting team. Maybe why they get the most offensive rebounds in the country because they miss all the time, which could play into it. So my underdog special features another 15 seed, like you mentioned, Oral Roberts, taking on the number 2 seed in the South region, Ohio State. Ohio State, a 16-point favorite, the over-under total there skyrocketing 157. I want this on the record before I start and dive into the metrics. I think Ohio State wins and wins comfortably. I could see them winning by 10, 12, maybe even 14. I just do not believe that Ohio State covers. I have the Buckeyes advancing all the way to the Elite Eight, like I mentioned, facing off against Purdue in the South Regional Final. I just think that Oral Roberts has a player on their team that will allow them to keep pace in this game. His name is Max Abmas. He does not miss often. Also, it is weird. His last name is spelled Abmas. Abmas. I don't know how they got that, but just so you know, his name is Max Abmas. He averages 24 points per game. He shoots nearly 43% from the three-point line. He has scored 40-plus twice this season. He has scored in the 30s 5 additional times this season. And listen, this is nothing new against Ohio State. Their defense has struggled all year. They ranked 79th in the country in defensive efficiency. In the Big Ten, opponents were able to play their pace they wanted to. They allowed the fastest pace from their opponents in Big Ten competition. And Oral Roberts plays at the 39th fastest possession length in all of the country this season. They want to score. They want to get out there. I think it is a high-scoring game, and the total reflects that because of Ohio State's lack of defense, and Oral Roberts also awful on the defensive end, 285th in the country when it comes to defensive efficiency. So I think we will see some points. I just think Max Abmas is able to keep the Golden Eagles. Is that what it is? They're in the Summit League. Able to keep ORU in pace with Ohio State. I still think Ohio State wins by double digits. I just don't think they can cover that 16-point spread.
Yeah, and I think that game goes way over, too. You were talking about offensive efficiency. You have 2 teams who are in the top 25 in their offensive rating when you balance it out in terms of the teams they're playing. I just like that. Anytime you have that situation like that, I like over. I know it's a high number, but this game got to, say, would you be surprised if it was 85-78, something like that? It could certainly be that with the way Oral Roberts scores. But I think this one goes over. There's 2 really too high big totals. There's one that's 162 or so, the Colgate game. There's 157. I think the 162 goes under and the 157 goes over. But that's the one I like the most in terms of I like the over in that game.
I mean, this was against Illinois, which is far superior competition to Oral Roberts. But think back to the overtime Big Ten title game. It ended 91-88, but Ohio State was in that. The defense just can't really hold at times for Ohio State. We saw that even earlier on in the Big Ten tournament against Minnesota when Minnesota was down by 14 with 3.5 minutes left, and they came back. That one ended 79-75. So even approaching that over-under category of the 157. Again, Ohio State will win. I have the Buckeyes in my Elite Eight. I just think Oral Roberts and Max Abmas mainly able to keep up pace and cover that spread of 16 points. So we are now on to – oh, go ahead.
Well, real quick, talking about late leads, I believe it's 5 games total that Ohio State lost leads in the last 3 minutes of the game. And my partner on the radio in the morning, his thing is they don't have a closer. And even though Washington is good, they don't have a guy who you know is going to get the ball late. And because you don't know that, you lose a lot of late leads. I like Ohio State like you do, but it's right. When you have a team that can't close, it's hard to say it going against another team who is a tournament team who probably has gotten a lot of closing done to hope that they go a long way. I like Ohio State a lot. I love their personnel, but I kind of worry about them a little bit because of the late game scenarios.
Yeah, I mean, you wonder. Dwayne Washington Jr. is a great scorer, a great three-point shooter, but E.J. Liddell might be the guy they key in on, so who's taking that last shot between them? It's a very interesting conundrum for Chris Holtmann at times. Every game leading up to that Big Ten title game against Illinois, Ohio State had a big lead late and allowed the other team to come back and make that a ball game. It was really only the Illinois game where the Buckeyes did the opposite. They were down late against Illinois and were able to force that into overtime. Speaking of one of those games that Ohio State had a big lead in and then allowed that team to come back, the Big Ten semifinals against their rivals, Michigan. And I'm having this as my 4th creative category of my choosing. What is life like without Isaiah Livers? Game of the week. And that would be Michigan taking on whatever 16 seed wins in the first 4. It could be Mount St. Mary's. It could be Texas Southern. Before I dive into talking about Michigan a little bit, you liked Mount St. Mary's in the first 4 games. Why was that?
I do. I like Mount St. Mary's because I think they'll get up and down efficiently. It's a big difference but saying I'm a fast-paced team and I'm going to get a bunch of shots up. Well, that's great. What's your offensive efficiency like? Mount St. Mary's is a better offensive efficiency. I also believe in the conference they played more than I believe in Texas Southern. It's just one of those where initially when I saw the lines and I was going through it, I said, definitely I like Mount St. Mary's. Sometimes you just look at it and go, I think that's the better team, and that's how you pick it. I think that's the way you also do it when you're talking about these playing games.
Michigan will beat whoever the winner is.
Oh, yeah. Let's do that.
Or Texas Southern.
By 25. But I think they win big, whoever they play, even without Isaiah Livers.
I was going to say the line will probably be around 22, 23. The average opponent in a 1-16 game, the one generally wins by an average of around 23 points in the last 8-10 NCAA tournaments, whatever that might be. So Michigan will win this game. But what we know about Michigan right now, they will be without Isaiah Livers. He suffered a stress injury in his right foot. He is out indefinitely, Hope to have him back maybe by the second weekend. We're not really sure about the Wolverines. Michigan lost 3 of their last 5 games heading into the NCAA tournament. Not a lot of people are high on them right now. They're probably the number 1 seed that everybody thinks is going to lose first in this NCAA tournament. Some people don't even think Michigan's going to get out of the round of 32, depending on who they face off between LSU and St. Bonnie. I do not prescribe to that. I think Michigan is still a Sweet 16 team, possibly even an Elite 8 team, depending on who their matchup is in the round of 16. But Michigan has a couple of reasons where I think they're okay without Isaiah Livers. And yes, losing your second leading scorer is not good. I'm not going to argue for that. But the game against Ohio State, the reason they struggled was not because they missed Isaiah Livers. Franz Wagner played a terrible game. 8 points on 2 of 10 from the field, fouled out early. And I really think Michigan should have won that game had they gone down to Hunter Dickinson on that final possession. He was taking over against Ohio State. So I don't really blame Isaiah Livers' absence as the main reason Michigan lost that game to Ohio State. So I think Michigan can turn things around because they play such a strong team brand of basketball. And as you mentioned, Mount St. Mary's and Texas Southern, very interesting dynamic. Texas Southern plays at the 41st fastest tempo in the country. Mount St. Mary's second to last in college basketball, 356th. So depending on who Michigan faces off against, again, I don't think it's going to be much of a contest. The spread will probably be around 22, 23 points, and I think Michigan wins by 20 plus.
Yeah, even though you said that pace was the way it is, still a good offensive rating for Mount St. Mary's. And the thing that they do that I really like is they will definitely get the ball distributed back and forth. They're a good assist team. They're very efficient. I'm not with you on Michigan, though, advancing past. If they get LSU, I'd like it because of the way LSU doesn't play any defense and they're so isolation-based. They play against St. Bonaventure. I think the Bonnies could take them. I like St. Bonaventure to beat LSU. I think it's going to be a close game down the stretch. I think, personally, Michigan would like to see LSU more than they'd like to see St. Bonaventure.
I agree. St. Bonaventure plays a rather similar brand of basketball to Michigan, which is team first, and they have pretty much everybody in their starting lineup can contribute for the Bonnies. I think that's a worse matchup for Michigan. I think although LSU's offense is incredibly potent, top 5 in the country, and Trenton Watford and Cam Thomas can take over a game because of how bad they are on the other end of the floor, I think Michigan could be able to take advantage of that in that round of 32 matchup. I think St. Bonaventure provides more of a challenge for Michigan. The last game we did not talk about for this weekend, other than the Michigan State game we assume might be against BYU, is Illinois and Drexel. The spread there is large. The Illini favored by 22.5 over the Drexel Dragons, the 16 seed out of the CAA. They are playing obviously in that 116 matchup in the Midwest region. Anything any Illinois fan should be concerned about as they head into that opening round of 64 matchup?
I looked for every reason to lay that big number. Again, I like free throws, both making them and defensive free throws, not allowing your team. I like the offensive rebound stuff. I just couldn't find anything to lay that big of a number. I tried. I went through every stat that I normally look at, and it looks like to me that Drexel's a team that could keep this within 3 touchdowns kind of thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do. I think the best bet probably overall would be first half Illinois. If you find a first half line, normally the first half line is about half of what the line is, so probably maybe around 12 or 11.5, and think that Illinois is going to get out early, get the big lead, and then late in the game when they've got guys sitting down and Drexel's making some baskets, maybe you end up losing the cover. But that's probably the best bet I can figure out from it because I went through all the numbers. I just don't, even the total at 143, I don't see a good number on that either. It doesn't stand out to me. Drexel's, again, one of the slowest paced teams in all of basketball as well, but they do shoot okay from 3-point range, and their field goal percentage is pretty good, almost 48%. That's a hard one to pick. I think the first half line, if I'm going to bet one thing with that game, it'd be Illinois minus whatever the number is in the first half.
Very smart, very astute. I would agree with you there. I don't love the line for the game because any 16 seed can get up early, or 1 seed rather can get up early on a 16 seed. So I like that idea to go with a first half for Illinois, whatever the spread might be, 11.5, 12. So our bonus pick for the weekend, assuming Michigan State wins tonight in the first 4, and they take on BYU in the round of 64 on Saturday night. Michael Xavier, we started off our conversation before we started recording speaking about the fact that BYU, coming from a Mormon institution, they are not allowed to play on Sundays. This game is scheduled to tip at 9:40 p.m. Eastern on Saturday night. If there was a delay in the game prior, and BYU and Michigan State have to wait until like 10 o'clock, what if the clock strikes midnight? Can BYU even be on the floor still?
Now, I was raised Catholic, okay? And so because being raised Catholic, we have a lot of rules. Leviticus is filled with them. You go through the Bible, you find a bunch of different things. But what I understand about both the Mormon faith, also the Jewish faith, and from the Catholic faith is that everything is sun up to sundown. So I would assume that their Sunday does not begin until the sun rises on Sunday. So more like 6:30, 7 o'clock is would it be a concern. If the game goes that long, then we all got some sort of issues. But I don't believe midnight would be a cutoff point for the start of the day. We think of the start of the day being midnight, but in religion, in general, it's usually sun up to sunset.
Fair enough.
And I love Michigan. I love Michigan State against UCLA. And by the way, one of the betting establishments out there, they're giving points for everybody who takes Michigan State. Michigan State is plus 123.5 at that particular site. So if I can get the 123.5, I'd love that. But I think outright, I think Michigan State's the better team. Only problem I have with it, it does look too easy. I mean, 2.5 with a team in UCLA that struggled down the stretch. Michigan State's played well down the stretch. It doesn't look good. But sometimes, you know what? Sometimes it's just that easy.
Right.
I'm going to go with that.
There's some bad voodoo ahead of that game for Michigan State and UCLA on Thursday night. You're listening to this. You already know what the result was. Yeah. But as we mentioned, a John Wooden statue outside of Mackey Arena. He was obviously the legendary head coach of UCLA after he left his time with the Purdue Boilermakers. Michigan State 0-5 prior to Thursday night in their last 5 trips to Mackey Arena. But I still think Michigan State gets the win. And I actually think they don't match up all that well with BYU. I was about to say they match up well because I think BYU is really strong offensively, 21st in the country in effective field goal percentage. They shoot the three super well. Caleb Lohner is one of the best three-point shooters maybe in all this NCAA tournament. But something about Michigan State and having Aaron Henry in that game, I think that would be a tough matchup for BYU to defend against. And if Rocket Watts is going to play well, that guard matchup also might be confusing. They would get Matt Harms, who they know from his days playing for Purdue. I actually would like Michigan State in the matchup against BYU on Saturday night to advance the round of 32. If, again, they beat UCLA in the first 4 matchup, but both Michael Severe and I believe that will be the case. By the time you listen to this podcast, you will know.
Yeah, you know, we talked to a lot of bracket people when you do radio, and BYU was one of the biggest surprises. No one thought they should be a 6. No one believed that. They all thought they should be a 7, an 8, something like that because of the schedule they played and the way they played. So they're overrated, in my opinion. Michigan State is just a better team. As you mentioned, Aaron Henry's playing very well. Rocket Watts always, ever since I found out his real first name wasn't Rocket, I'm off the board with him. Drove me crazy. I'm like, Mama named him Rocket. I'm going to call him Rocket. His name's not even Rocket. But I look at that game, and I'm with you. I think Michigan State beats UCLA, goes on and beats BYU as well.
I think Rocket Watts, although that is his nickname, his real name is Mark. We don't need to talk about that. That
Mark
actually sucks. But
it's horrible.
I think he needs to change his name now to Rocket Mortgage Watts, right? Because it's Michigan State basketball
not yet.
By Rocket Mortgage.
He can't do it yet, though.
Right.
Yeah, after he's done with college. Yeah.
Right. Oh, yeah, very true. Hey, by the way, shout out to Rutgers players and Iowa players, Geo Baker Jr., Jordan Bohannon saying not NCAA property in the fight for name, image, and likeness rights. Good for them. Take a stand.
Awesome.
Absolutely love it. In this NCAA tournament bubble-like environment when they're making a huge profit for the NCAA after a year we didn't have an NCAA tournament, just pay the players. It's a very simple thing. Michael Severe, giving you all the knowledge you need for this round of 64 opening weekend here, our full weekend preview on Locked On Big Ten. Religion advice, gambling advice, free throw advice, whatever you need in this month of March. Michael Severe is your guy. Michael Severe, I say, thank you very much. You're a great dear acquaintance. Yes.
And I say to you, go Orange.
Oh, let's go. We ended with that.
Go Orange, yes.